Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Strategy Roundtable, where as we're now officially in the back half of your 2024 season, time once again this help you with your AFL Fantasy side. Still 2 weeks of multi-buys left. We're going to look at the players that are off the bye, both just recently, one that's already played some games. There's one pivotal player that I feel like owners are desperate to ship off, but they're not sure if they can. And then there's just a bunch of stuff we've got to look line by line through the options that are available to us as we try to make our best assessment of what our teams might look for and look like over these next couple of months. Joining me on this podcast, it's been a couple of weeks since we've had him on, but if you've been checking out the AFL Fantasy Fanatics, you've been seeing him regularly. He's joined them there, but he's not lost to the Coaches Panel. I'm talking about Rucks. Hello, mate. Nice to see you. Let's not talk about our football team. Let's talk about AFL Fantasy, because it'll make us both much happier if we do that.
No, that's right. We do enough talking about the Crows over on the Fanatics pod, so we won't do that today. But good to see you, MJ. Great to be on. Love the Coaches Panel. It's good to be at a real, interesting point of the year. We're in the middle of the buys. A lot of the decisions we make in the next few weeks, not to be too dramatic, but will really help determine how you finish your season.
Oh, it's amazing. I was chatting with one of our Patreons, and if you're not a Patreon, there's a bunch of different tiers and rewards you can get involved with. The details in the description of this episode, whether you're watching the video on YouTube or you're checking out the audio podcast. I was chatting with them over in our Patreon app, and they were like, literally one decision this week cost me nearly 100 points. And he was alluding to the gap between Dunkley and Goulden, and then he continued to unpack for me the pain that he'd had and missing Gawn. And let's not go into this deep dive abyss of pain. That's not going to be good for anyone. But as a reminder for people, there are 6 teams on the bye this week. You still have the 3 trades available to you this week. It is Carlton, it is Gold Coast, it is Essendon, it is Melbourne, it is Geelong, and West Coast. Of those players that are currently available on your teams, they'll be blue dots on your team. Very simply, you can move them on and off your field. You can use them as your captaincy loop to quickly get a little understanding. So maybe if you popped a Sam Flanders, for example, last week, and wanted to see what impact it would do to your rank, that will still apply for this week as well. 3 trades a week. And there's a lot of big decisions that we've had to make. And I don't know, Jordox, there was a little bit hyperbole in your sentiment, but as someone like yourself who's ranked quite highly at the moment, there is that thought for a coach inside the top 1,000, which are really the coaches that are in the mix, probably the top 500 to be fair now, for getting a high, ranking. There is that kind of reminder of, man, 1 or 2 missteps through the bye, let alone in the back 10 weeks, and I could see myself just glide in the rear vision mirror really, really fast.
Absolutely. And the coaches that plan, I mean, I'm not too big on the planning. I mean, it's just because I don't have the time, but those that plan their buys meticulously come out the other end. They'll be the ones that are in good shape. So but like you said, you can do all the planning in the world. If you don't have Lady Luck on your side, well, bad luck.
Well, people had that on the weekend, and those that captained Nick Dacos,
MJ,
and didn't own Max Gawn, so they had the Neil Bullen.
10 minutes before that game, I changed my captain from Dacos to Gawn, and that's probably the difference between season over and still season live for my goals, anyway. So, lucky.
Live. Yeah, no, well, fair enough too. So, let's look at the options that are available for coaches. We're still very much in the throngs of upgrades and getting rid of either players that have done their job for money making, whether it be at the cash cow level or the mid-price range, that are on their buys and or popped out in cash, giving them the fev and bringing in guys off the buy. And so last week we introduced on the podcast kind of 4 categories that we wanted to look at as options to go for. They were line by line. We're going to figure out who we think's the best premium that's from now to the rest of the year. What's been has been. We don't really care. It's who you think is the top premium and why in AFL fantasy for the rest of the year. Then we're looking for a little bit of some coaches just don't want to go after the best, probably because they might not be able to afford it more than anything else. So they're still looking for a good value option. We want to help you in that. Then let's go unique. Unique doesn't always mean a bad thing. It's not a dirty word in fantasy, but maybe you're just trying to create some separation, whether it be leagues focused or you just want something different. And then there's just the hits and giggles. Maybe your season's done. It's a move that you'd never normally do if you're really sitting in the rank or league spot that you are, but you just want to do something fun. And so those are the 4 categories we're going to go for. We'll go line by line in a second, Jordox. You and I will talk through who we've got and why in these areas. I'm sure there'll be some there'll be some that we disagree on, but we'll put it in there regardless with it all. You know what? Let's not just make it about the 2 teams that are off the bye, the Port Adelaide and the Freo Dockers, because that could get very boring very quickly. It's very, very limiting in the options. So let's open it up to any player that is off the bye from now. We're going to factor them in. So let's talk about the top premiums right out in the defensive line. Is there a clear standout number 1 defender for you of the 6 teams we've got available to us, Jordox?
Yeah, we don't need to open up to the guys from round 12 to identify the number 1 man back there, and that's Luke Ryan, who is on an absolute tear. So in terms of top primo, I don't think you really need to look too far in terms of price, in terms of ceiling, in terms of scoring, and in terms of a guy that, you know, if you don't get your hands on him at some point, and it may even be too late, you know, he can take a season away from you. He's currently taking my season away from me, so I am going to try to get him. But, you know, at you know, over $1 million, it's a spicy meatball.
Yeah. It's tough for coaches, and we'll talk about forwards in a moment, but in the back line, you got a Dane Zorko who's got arguably the best matchup going around of defenders against St Kilda. And if you owned any of Sexton, Yuland, Collins, Flanders, my goodness me, Jeffrey, they all popped up big scores. So Zorko owners are looking at that. But yeah, man, 137 in his last 3, 1 score under 85 all year, 23% ownership across the formats. Gosh, it is hard to justify paying over that 7 figures for him, but for the better part of 2 seasons now, he's just not given us any reason not to trust that he's going to be one of the safest, most reliable guys. And yeah, he pops that 137 over another 3-week period and you don't have him. Whew, it gets a bit hard to hunt, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Freo have got Brendan Cox coming back in the next couple of weeks. Some people have sort of thought, could that hurt him? I don't think it does. The way Freo are playing, it shouldn't impact him at all.
Oh, look, you could probably maybe throw a She in the mix, but again, ownership percentage would say the vast majority of the community own Harry. I think he's a very, very good option, but when he's no longer the sole distributor off halfback, like he was over the first sort of 6-7 weeks, he's not at the Luke Ryan level. He can be, but in this kind of sometimes mid, sometimes forward, sometimes halfback role, he's still going to be 100, 105, maybe even push 110. But I just don't.
Well, he's priced.
He can hit
he's
top.
He's priced around that. So, you know, if he dropped under 900, a longer way down, it'd be an option. But yeah, right now at that price, it's not as enticing.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Who have you got as a good value pick? Value is a subjective term for some. They would take it as anything under 900,000. Others would say, no, if it's under 750, it's value. Our different markers of what we'd say, this is a value pick, this is not. Who for you just feels like it's such a good buy at his point, you can't really ignore him too much. Have you got one?
Oh, I do, but I'm not convinced we're going to see him, and that's young Colby McKercher. who, you know, obviously we all had him to start with. And, you know, most have moved him on. But if he comes back in and starts to share that role with Fisher, you know, we've seen what Fisher's been doing. He's value for sure. Bit of a hit and hope, though, because I don't think his foot's
I like
right.
him. Yeah. Look, it doesn't sound like he's coming back this week either. Again, this is Tuesday evening. We're recording this episode. So the injury lists have landed mostly at us Prime website, but it's still from the club seems to be indicating he's not quite right. And why would you rush him? Like, he's your prime draft prospect. It won't determine your season. I think that's fair. Look, if I was going value, there is a big warning. I'll attack this one, though. I still love the price point of Lockie Whitfield, 804,000. He's got a seasonal average of 100, gone 104 of his last 3. The big warning I'll put there is James Jordan has already done a job on him once this year, and he's going to get him again in 15. And James Jordan is just starting to chip away this tag narrative for the best rebounding and or intercept defenders. He's just finding a way to just get under their skin and stop them. He did it to Tom Stewart a weekend and 3 or 4 others, including Lockie Whitfield. The good news is the Crows don't have one of those, so he'll just be free to play wherever he likes on the weekend. But yeah, for me, I just like Lockie Whitfield. It might not be for everybody, but he's there.
Well, his scoring's been really good. He just had that tag game, like you said, but his scoring's been brilliant.
Yeah.
If you'd started him and still had him, you would not be complaining.
No, well, you will in round 15, but beyond that, he's not giving you anything to be too disappointed by.
Yeah.
Let's help make a little bit of the 6 teams that are available to us. So again, we've talked a little bit about Freo there, but we're looking at Port players, we're looking at Freo players, looking at the New South Wales pair of Sydney and GWS. So we're looking at North and we're looking at Brizzy, guys that have had a bye that we still think are there. Is there anyone in that unique bracket for you that you go, look, it might not be for everyone, but you want something different? Here's a pick.
It's probably more of a cash grab type move than anything. It's certainly unique, less than 1% ownership. Just a guy that we all kind of thought about starting, but then injury struck, and that's Heath Chapman. So, we know what the Freo defenders are doing at the minute. Ryan and Clark, on the weekend it was not on the weekend, sorry, the one before, but it has been quite evident that Freo are playing a lot of kick-to-kick back there. Look, Chapman's come back. He's now 6 weeks back. Nothing exciting in his first sort of month, but he's found his way and he's hit a couple of nice scores the last 2 weeks, 88, 91, 561K. Look, it's not a pick that you're going to ride to the end of the season, but geez, if you're looking for someone just as a bit of a stopgap and a really cheap option, he's there.
Yep. Oh, geez, I like that. That's a good shout. For me, I'm going, this breaks every part of the Crow code, but Dandon's hard to ignore given what he can do. He's only in under 8% of teams at the moment. 852K, just the score under 87 in his last 8. And he's got a ceiling, and that's important. When you're going unique, you need a player that's got the potential to pump out 120, 140. He's already done that this year with a 136 a handful of weeks ago. So to me, I don't think Dan Houston's a for everybody pick. I think a lot of people, as you've mentioned, that don't own a Luke Ryan are looking at that 7 figures going, how am I going to get this? They might be looking at a Geordie Clark as an option. I'm not sure what your take is. I'm keen on it. I have no desire to jump on Jordan whatsoever as a prospect. Outside of that last 3, he's been a nice mid-price buy for us. Like if you stay him, he's showed solid, but outside of the past 3 weeks, he hasn't given us any indication of stealing. And I feel like I'm paying scores I've missed if I was to jump on. What's your take?
You'd be excuse me. You'd be paying for the last 3 weeks. Yeah. You'd be paying for the last 3 weeks, which have been, wonderful. But I don't know. I feel like he's, he's had such a great season, all those 90s in a row, and now he's got some big tons. I just think he's the one that they'll probably lock down on. Say if they were playing a Sydney, I'm not sure if they are, but if you were to lock down on one of those guys, Luke Ryan or Geordie Clark, it would be Geordie Clark. And so try and find the cash to get to Ryan if you're looking at Clark. I know that's easier said than done, of course. But just on Houston, I do like the Houston.
That's true.
Houston's a guy that, we are at the point of the year. We've still got, 12 weeks, I don't know, something like that. But he's a guy that can put together a 5 or 6 week stretch, of real big scores that could really get you flying. And, you said he hit a 136 this year. He's done 150s in the past. So, he's a good price.
That's true.
I don't mind it.
Yep. If you don't really care, but all you want to do is pick a player that is just fun to own, is there a fun pick in this defensive line off these 6 teams that have had their bye yet? Is there someone you go, this is just fun, get on and enjoy?
Yeah, I don't know if you would say you get on and enjoy, but in terms of watchability, Nick Blakey is certainly.
I like that.
Yeah. Sorry, he was on the bye, wasn't he? Oh, he's playing us this week, of course. Yeah. Nick Blakey. I know. I mean, he got tactical sub on the weekend, which is a bit odd for Sydney. But look, I wouldn't recommend it. His scoring's not there. But when you said before someone fun, he's very fun to watch. Has he had a good score? Yeah, actually, he scored.
He fits the box, man, for sure.
He scored a 132 in round 7. Good for you, Lizard.
Yeah, he's got some ceiling about him.
Maybe next year. What about you?
He's got some go. And again, gift up a lot of points to inside forward 50 entries that don't seem to hit a target too often.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a great little thing for him. If I'm staying in my Port Adelaide lane at the moment, one of my most favourite players to own is Jace Burgoyne. If you've watched football for 20 years, just the flashbacks of a Burgoyne running, using their silky skills on the left and the right. Geez, Jace at 666K. In his last 6, he's got 2 tons and he's got 2 scores of 90 plus. I couldn't advocate it for anybody that's seriously for winning themselves a car or trying to get themselves a hat or anything like that. But if you just want to own a player that's just a beautiful of the football and he's a genuine fun to own, much like Blakey in that, geez, for me, Burgoyne could go all right.
I like it. I don't like the memories of his dad, but I like it. Just quickly, though, there's one guy I've been watching probably for the last month, and he's not doing anything. But Bailey Scott, he's a guy who last year finished, the back end of the year really hot when he moved into, well, actually he was playing wing. But, if there's a spot there next to Fisher and Colby doesn't get back and Sheasel stays in the middle, I've just been waiting to see him sort of deploy Scott back because he's a good price and he knows how to fantasy, when he's got the right role. So I don't know, keep an eye on him.
Yeah, it's probably the move that if you're jumping on now, you're doing it more in hope than rather in response to something. So it's a higher risk move. But again, like you said, you want a guy that's got not just projection, but proven, man, he can go 90 over an 8-week stretch. It's not for me, but if someone's like, want to have some fun and hope something goes my way, knock yourself out. He might sit in that spot.
Yeah.
Let's look in the midfield then. This is an interesting spot to go. We have got a ton of options that we could consider, not just from the 2s that are about to come off the bye for us this week, but for the other 4. We mentioned at the top of the episode, there was some 70, 80 point swings with 1 or 2 moves that you made on the weekend. Of the 6 teams that are available to us, who have you got as the top premium mid from now to the end of the year? There are some good options to choose here, Jordox.
Yeah. Oh, the absolute top would just have to be Errol Goulden. I mean, we saw it on the weekend. It sucks because you've missed the 150, the big one, but in terms of a guy that can finish the year, with 110, 115 average, maybe even more. He's someone I would be looking at. He's getting up there, though. He's still under $1 million. So,
yeah, that's probably the benefit, isn't it? You've already made 30, 40K off if you did it last week compared to almost any of the others. I'm going to go different. Mind the golden shout, by the way, because I think he's, a handful of points per game off what he did last year. And we were all frothing about how good he was. Granted, it was as a full, but we were frothing, and I think he's only about 4 or 5 points per game off, and he'd had a relatively lack of ceiling frequent compared to what he had last year. That said, it's only halfway through the year. He's still got plenty of time to pump out a couple more 150s. I'm going Caleb Sarong. I know it feels like the past is indicating the future, but I really find a hard way to kind of go against him. Down at 952,000. He's got 7 tons in a row. He's got a monster ceiling. And importantly, even though he now is finding himself getting tagged more regularly than not, he's still finding a way at tons for you. And one of the most frustrating things in the fantasy ownership space is when you own a premium mid, they're going to get a stopper at some point, and they go and give you 60, 70, 80. Man, I just don't see how a world outside of injury and suspension, Sarong over the better part of now 2 years in this role has barely dropped under 90. And so for me, I'm really quite confident that Caleb's going to maintain that ton run, let it go 10 for the rest of the year pretty safely, if not 115.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd almost put him in the best value. I mean, at 950 for what he can do for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I do not disagree with that.
All right. Well, if you're not putting Sarong in there, and again, it does feel 952K player, it is your best value pick, although he's definitely got some a little bit of value sat there.
Yeah.
Who from these 6 clubs are you saying, best value buy for our midfields?
Well, I was pretty happy to just look at Freo and Port because there are so many options there. I think the best value, and there's it's a bit like what you said about Bailey Scott. It's not on anything I've seen. It's if it happens and you can be the first to do it. But Andy Brayshaw is dirt cheap for, what he's done the last few years. And, you might have more thoughts on it than me about what's changed with his role. If it's Hayden Young has come in and he's been moved out a little bit. I've been really surprised at how underwhelming Brayshaw's been this year. So perhaps after a freshen up and now, the run towards finals, hopefully for Freo fans, we could see a bit more of the Brayshaw from 22, 23 and at 84K. Pretty tasty. And then the other one, which you may or may not have, is Connor Rosé, but maybe you can talk about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind the Brayshaw shout at that price point. Now, it's all, at worst, what does he do? Deliver what he's given for you this year. There's definitely been a dynamic change through that Fremantle midfield, undoubtedly, and you've alluded to that. Mini Monk on the podcast has talked about it numerous times throughout the year about exactly what's happened and why. But yeah, I'm probably not going there, but if someone's like, I'm big on Brayshaw, I think I could get a 107, 108 average over the back end of the year, get a couple of easy kills, a few nice matchups, get a couple of ceiling games. Yeah, okay. Maybe that sits more in the unique side based on the top 1,000 ownership percentage rather than everything else, but I don't mind it. Rosie, I'm interested in. He's not the guy that I've got as best value because I think he'll be that in 2 weeks' time, although I wouldn't hate a coach jumping on him. It's not financially smart because you're losing cash, but if you're looking to jump off someone like a Dempsey, a Salem, Clayton Oliver, I want to ask you about him at the end of the podcast too, by the way, about whether or not that's the right approach. So just tuck that one away before we get to the end of the podcast. Like, we've got a ton of these guys this week. Bonner is another that are sitting in this 550 to 800,000 range. And so I don't hate someone going Rosie this week. I'll do it. I'd rather do it in 2 weeks' time, but I wouldn't hate it if someone did. I still think the best value pick, and I know it feels wrong, I still think it's Tom Green. I know his last ton was back in round 7, and it's a long time ago, but at 743,000, he's had 2 tags that I think most coaches wouldn't have predicted on either side of the bye. I don't think coaches expected the double team tag that up until halftime, he was on track last weekend for 115. He was on pace, and then Warple did a really good job. So hours for him because he did a brilliant job on it. And then prior to the bye, I don't think anybody thought Blix was going to go run with him because the Geelong up for inside mids has been a really nice one. So for me, I'm not too concerned about the injury around the ankle, although it was clearly hampered at that one-time score. For me, I'm just like, a guy who at the start of the season, I thought, and let alone after 3 rounds, where the coaches definitely thought, this is a 110 mid, and we're getting him at under 750K. The ownership is so high now that the risk of going him unique isn't there at like 25%. I just go, oh man, if you told me I was getting Tom Green at under 750K, even off tons for 4 or 5 weeks, I'm still taking that every day of the week.
Yeah, I've been worried about Green for a while. I mean, I started him, so it's different, when you have someone and then they drop money. But in a funny way, MJ, this lack of scoring and perhaps it is the tags, perhaps it's the ankle, perhaps it's the absence of Josh Kelly and a couple of more of those older bodies around him. I don't know, to help him out. I mean, if you're double teaming Tom Green, you're not having Josh Kelly run around. So I think that'll help him. I think as an owner, these scores are just kind of good because I think a few people will look elsewhere now, and maybe when he turns, it'll be too late. And those who have him, but you cannot deny the value. You can't deny the scoring power. I just want to see it. It's been a while.
Yeah, fair enough too. Let's go unique then. Find us something different. Let's clarify what unique is again. Let's make it. They've got single-digit ownership across the board. Otherwise, we could be here all for a long time to see unique. Who have you got for us that if you're looking for someone that's got single-digit ownership, you're saying, MJ, Coaches Panel listeners, this is where you do yourself. Who have you got?
I'll let you go first on that one because I am just finalising who I like.
Got one.
Go on.
Okay. Well, mine, this guy's got 5% ownership, 3 scores of 120 plus in his last 6, and he's coming red hot off the back of a 128 under 870K. By the way, he's one of a couple of Brownlow medals. Lockie Neal. To me, 5% ownership last week was the prime time to jump on it. I think Rid spoke about him a little bit last week on the AFL Fantasy Strategy Roundtable of a guy that he might not be someone you hold for 8 to 10 weeks, but for a 4 to 6 week block to get you to that quote uncompleted midfield, and then you start running fixtures, he's absolutely a guy that can sit there, and he's got St Kilda this week. So there is a probability of a Whittaker tag coming his path. So I'll absolutely flag that for you there. But to me, if you want someone that can go on a run of 120 multiple times over the next month, then at 5% ownership, he's not bad. He's not bad at all.
No, and I remember this last year, grabbing Neil for a stint, and depending on the timing, depending on the time that you grabbed him, you were either really happy with that or really put off by it. So it kind of depends on how you went last year, whether you're going to do it this year. I will say, watching him last weekend, he looked like Brownlow medal Lockie Neal. And I don't mean the 2023 Brownlow. I mean the really good Brownlow, which was 2020 when he was clearly best player in the comp. Maybe not so much last year, but I digress. I like him. I just the tags worry me, and the legs, and he should be slowing down by now, but he looked good last week. Look, the one I'll give you, he's just under 5%. And on another pod, I actually talked him down last week, and that's Chad Warner. And the reason I talked him down was because he put together these 2 scores in a row, 1-7 and 1-15, but he kicked 7 goals across those 2 games, which is incredible. But as a midfielder, if you're going to rely on your score build is going to rely on kicking goals, you might not hit the mark every week. And look, last week he was a lot slower early. They all were, Sydney. Goulden, Heaney, they all got going after quarter time. But he kicked another 2 goals, and that took him to just a flat ton. But that's now 3 tons in a row, 4 of his last 7, lots of 90s. Just waiting for a ceiling score. But if he ever accumulates and kicks a bag of goals, he's going to be something. 5% ownership. I guess my point is, my concern was how can he keep the scores going with the goals? But the answer to that is he just keeps kicking them because he's kicked another 2 on the weekend. So,
yeah, he probably sit right in that for fun category too, wouldn't he? He's more a super coach performer, but he's just fun to watch and own as well. And again, that's what you're looking for, Uniques. You're for ceiling. You're looking for something that can create some separation, and he definitely does that for you. So certainly if you're banging the door down for a hat, he's not the guy you're probably looking to create that unique approach and separation. But in your league, if you're like, oh man, I just need a couple of good matches, go check that Sydney run, see what it looks like. They got the Crows this week, so history would say they're not great for inside mids of late, but last week they gifted points to inside mids. And if they perform anything like last 2 weeks this week, oh man, it could be a big one.
The other one too,
fun midfield pick. I've got
one. Just before we get to fun, because Chad Warner's probably the fun one. LDU's another guy that at 850, I think his percentage is about 6% now ownership. But he's someone that he was a little disappointing on the weekend just gone, but he's someone that could clearly average, I reckon, 105, 110 for the run home. Who's your fun one? And then I'll give you mine.
My fun one, here we go. In his last 4, 113, 112, and 99. He's priced under 770,000. And when there is a stoppage to be won and this bloke is around the ball, you're pretty confident he's going to have some say in either getting it through him or him winning it. I'm talking about Jason Horne-Francis. Unless you're a North Melbourne fan, it wouldn't be a fun pick to be able to get him. He just so fun to watch. His explosive pace, his dare, his run. There are shades of Dangerfield. And that's diminishing his own identity, but rather just that young danger and even some renaissance moments that Paddy still gives us where his speed and power out of stoppage and then hitting a target is wow. So, it ain't going to win you a hat or a car, but fun to own. Who have you got, man?
Kind of similar. Like, he's been fun to watch because I've got him in a keeper league and he's an older guy who, this time last year, fair income, I thought was washed, cooked, done. But it turns out, like a fine Ollie Wines, he's getting better with age. Oh, you like that? He's had a cracking year, and it's been so good to watch. Like, just as a footy watcher, a guy who you thought was done, he's just looked revitalised this year, and with him, Horne-Francis, and then those incredible guys, Butters and Rosique, like they have got such a formidable midfield. He's probably too expensive to be realistic about it. 800K actually. Now, you know what? You could make an argument for it because he had his sub-affected 30. That's why his price has dropped right down. If you look at his scores since he missed in round 4, he's right up there. So for 800K, you could for fun.
That's the category. You haven't put him as the top primo, which is correct. You've put him in there. So I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Let's hit forward line for us then. Even as you look on the graphic, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see there's not a lot of options we put in there of players that have come off the bye. So we're definitely going to stretch it, I'm sure, between us, Jordox, about maybe looking the week prior as well, because that's where there's some good options. I know we've been going back and forward, but really, is it just as simple as Zorko and Heaney are the top options? Is there anybody else you could even say is in that conversation as the top one? Or are these just battling it out 1 and 2 for the top premium?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're going to say who's going to finish the entire season as 1 and 2, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to catch those two. The consistency from Heaney, the ceiling and the, denying of age from Zorko has been phenomenal. But I think give it some more time. And Zach Fisher and Alex Sexton, I believe they can continue. Alex Sexton's not in this, is he? Zach Fisher will stick with.
No, he's on the bye.
Yeah, so guys who've had the bye, Zach Fisher is, I think, what is it, 5 tons in a row? And no real sign of slowing down.
Fisher,
I really,
110
Fisher.
plus in the last 5.
Yeah, I thought the West Coast game might trip him up because I heard it was going to be quite wet. He didn't even need the marks. He just finds the footy and puts it to boot. High kick to handball ratio. He might be the number 1 from here to the end. I wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, if he holds that, Heaney's ceiling still there, but it's kind of drifted a little bit. And Zorko this week, to me, I've got him penciled in. If anybody's going to go 150 this week, if I had to put my life on someone going 1 this week, it does feel like him based on that St Kilda matchup. How comfortable they are to just give teams the ball in the back. They just clearly believe Ross Lyon's structural tactic is have as much footy as you want in your own defensive 50. Don't care. Round arc to arc. We don't care. Now you get forward half of the ball with the ground. Okay, game on. Something's going to kick it around there. Like I think last week we did for our round review episode that we did for our Patreons and Spotify paid subscribers. I think it was Collins, Hewland, Jeffrey, Sexton, and also Flanders all had 10 plus marks.
Yeah, they did.
Even Matt Rowell got a mark. I mean, good day. Like the dude that doesn't mark can get a mark in this kind of matchup. So, yeah, man. And Zorko could hit that 148 break even this week. And really, again, you talked about Luke Ryan at the top of this episode. Man, imagine find a way to get Ryan this week, find a way to get Zorko this week. I don't know a lot of coaches that would have that level of salary just sitting on the side of really you're talking about 500, 600, 700K in the kitty and moving off a Salem, Oliver, Dempsey type, Bonner type.
It's interesting, the Zorko one too, because I wonder, slightly off topic, but I wonder those who in recent weeks invested and paid up for Zorko will then possibly be put off then investing in a Luke Ryan, because Zorko's had is it 80 and a 96 the last 2? I mean, if you've paid $1 million for that, you want a refund. But the payday,
90 odd last week. Only it's this week. Yeah,
the payday will be this Friday. But I'm nervous, MJ. I own him and I'm excited. I'm going to stick the V on him for sure. It's just too obvious, though. I bet someone else pops and goes huge, not him. We'll see.
We'll see. I've probably got Zorko and Heaney as the top 2 premiums. I've actually still got Fisher as my value pick. I think he was a real, not just an obvious pick, but a gift of a selection for us last week, whether we needed it in the defensive line or forward line, but still priced at just a touch over 800K. I don't think he'll have this monopoly for the rest of the year. I do think McKercher will come back in as we get into the final 8 weeks of the year, and North, they know their season's gone, but as North even more experiment with, what does it look like with Tucker here, Scott there? Let's give Riley Hardiman another crack. Let's put, they're going to keep experimenting with things to learn lessons of players' development and opportunities, while Fisher's got this distribution just locked down as his own. You're right. He can go with those big two boys. But I think at some point we'll see, let's see what the side looks like with. And that might just clip some of that ceiling a little bit. But it's not a reason not to get him. I just don't know if he can do it for another 10, 11 weeks, which to be the top premium, he much needs to. Who's the guy you think's a ripping value pick at the moment? There's some good ones that are sitting there, that's for sure, even though we don't love parts of the forward line.
No, look, this guy, excuse me, I don't know. I just was looking at the Freo Port guys. Look, Luke Jackson's still. Look, you wouldn't do it, but at 12K, I mean that is very cheap for a guy that's averaging 84. You know, if you did it this week, he could help you out covering a Max Gawn, you know, with a bit of DPP.
It's true.
Yeah. Look, I wouldn't say he's the value guy, but he's one of them. Who have you got?
A value. Yeah. For me, it's Fisher. I think it'd be the case. The guy that I've got in my just for fun is probably the unique that I'd really like to encourage people to go. So we can get to that in a second, but it's probably the real. We'll get to that. We got it's bait and hook, Jordan.
Yeah.
It's bait and hook.
That's true. The master.
Just make people listen another 2 minutes. Who's your unique? Because the forwards is so. Look, it's actually
before we do,
it's Zorko here.
With value, where are you sitting with Boak? Because he hit that 70 before the bye. He's still 707K and has the ability to score tons. Do you think he's not really an option if Rosie's back and they've got the full cluster back together, or is he still someone to keep an eye on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. My quick answer is I want very little to do with Boak. Now, there's this misconception that Rosie goes out and Boak is the one that has his scoring pop, but the centre bounce starter doesn't give any indication to that. Rather, it was an Ollie Wines that both really got a little bit of a bump and a clip without him. So I'm not too worried about the CB component of Boak. I just don't trust it. I don't trust the fact that he'll get managed through the back half of the season. I don't trust the fact that he's so able to be put in these different spots on the flank, on a wing, through the mid, whatever. I just don't trust it. If I was going down, I'd rather go to Mead, and I wouldn't do that either, by the way. If I was getting any Port Adelaide forward eligible guy, it would be Mead, and that's more for, man, can he jag me a 75? And at the price point, I don't mind it. But I don't buy into the Rosie out Boak popped up, well, not based on the centre bounce component. He did in scoring for sure. But now probably not for me.
Forward eligible, how do you reckon his goal kicking's going this year? 0 goals, 11.
It's not bad.
It's not good. If he can turn that around.
It's better than me.
If he can turn that around.
He's doing better than me. Yeah. It might change it, that's for sure. My going unique, we've kind of hit that. We've talked. Actually, no, let's do the going unique. In his last 4, an 81, a 115, and a 98. And he's just over 550K. So, again, unique and cheap, which might just be the sweet spot for everybody to be able to hit those two. And in 2.1% of teams at time of recording, it's James Peatling. Could be the play for you there. There's a time limit on when you want to be on him, with no Cornelio and Kelly in the side, and a bunch of other prospects as well. So certainly Pipes Kingley has moved a few guys around in this period of time. To me, it's he's here for a short time and a good time, not a long time. You're just dating him. You're not marrying him and staying with him to the end of the year. But he could absolutely, if you're just like, man, I just need an 80 over the next 3 weeks. It just means I don't have to get up to a Zorko, hypothetically.
Mm.
Maybe you're choosing Ryan over Zorko and you're like, man, I just need a cheap 550 sort of guy. Yep, jump on Peatling, have some fun. For me, it's a short window of time, but if you could make yourself 200-300 points over the next 2-3 weeks and jag yourself another 50k generation, he's got a break even of 21. So even a 60, he's going to make you 20-30k.
Yeah. Look, I like him. My concern with him is we were considering this a few weeks ago because the price was right and Josh Kelly was out and they bloody omitted him. So I don't know what they're doing with him, but look, you'd think he's probably in till the end now. I'll do you one better. We're talking unique. We're talking fun. We're talking maybe let's have a look at one more week. This guy hasn't played in over a month.
Okay.
He's been a shadow of his former self. And he's the captain. But
this is good.
Thrown into the guts, back to where he plays his best footy. He got North the win on the weekend. That's Jai Simpkin. Just a lazy 132 on the weekend, MJ, if you don't mind.
Big fan.
My goodness.
Big fan of that one.
Could you do it this week? Or you have to look?
I'm all over it. Yes.
Yeah. Got the Pies
it's
this week.
30K. He's the guy I'd pick just for fun. Got the Pies this week, who are a depleted midfield. It's 30K from an Ollie Dempsey up guy. Like, this is the guy, if I was having fun, I'd go for him. He's shown that in this midfield role, and he did have that midfield role. He's a 90s guy. And the thing that has robbed us of seeing Jai at his best is multiple head knocks and politely, while that's a significant risk, absolutely.
Well, he hasn't.
He looks good. He looks healthy.
He hasn't had any continuity in his footy in the last 2 years. Last year was concussions and random injuries. This year, obviously, with the very highly reported hit from Jimmy Webster in preseason, then he came back and he's just been out of sorts. And he's just come back from a quad, and they really waited until he was ready. And yeah, he looked great on the weekend. He looked really good. So 580 could be good
this week. Then it's the Bulldogs. Like, that's a really nice 3 weeks. Again, you might only need him for 4 or 5 weeks. If he was just a pure mid, I probably wouldn't go there, even though it's crazy. But in the forward lines, again, to run over the ground, we have and many others have this year. Man, unless you name Zorko, Heaney, or Flanders, there's not really many other forwards that you're like, yes, even the ones we felt dependable, like a Dylan Moore. Yes, he's given us 130s, but he's given us 60s. A Tom Powell still floating around okay as a 70s. He's an okay 70s.
The only thing with
Simpkin to me is, man,
the only thing with Simpkin is if he goes 85 plus again, he won't be that unique for long. But I'll give you one more, and it's probably more of a draft guy because the price. But I've just enjoyed watching this guy. So Justin McInerney at Sydney picked up forward status this year.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be too relevant otherwise. Owned by 1.23%. You might not have noticed him. If you play draft, you should have. But he's just casually chipping either side of the buy. Before that was a lower one, and then a pretty consistent string of 80s and even a ton. So, he's averaging 80 as a forward. And the way that Sydney are, monstering sides, that midfield group, it could be one for fun. We'll put him there.
I like that. I'm a fan of that one. Look, technically we should talk about Rucks, but politely, are you really trading into a ruckman at this point in time? Like, people that are Gorn owners are just counting their blessings. Then English and Marshall owners, you're not moving off them this week. If you're a Cherry owner, politely, with the exception of Gorn, you're actually not going to make any points. And you could argue that as great as Gorn has been over the first 10 to 12 weeks of the year, you could argue, despite a tough run, Cherry's got as good as a run as any. You're probably not trading into Grundy. So I don't think anybody's trading into a ruckman this week. If you're trading into anyone with ruck status, it's probably Nathan Kruger, because you need someone under 300k. You want more the versatility to just move some pieces around. To me, if you're going anyone in the ruck line this week, it's Krugs, because the matchup's good, the break-even's good, the likely security, at least for the next month, even though you're trading into a guy about to get his buy. To me, Kruger, the ruck, I'd even go, yeah, I get why.
Well, he's a cash cow. He's got forward status, and he's going to make money now after that score. I'll give you two guys in the ruck, right? And obviously,
okay, all right. I'll put the graphic back up where the rucks.
This this guy isn't even in the category because his buy is next week. But have a look at big Kieran Strawny last week for the Crows, 427k. I'm hearing his groin's okay. I think we'll see him again. Okay. And then the other one I was going to say was, in terms of the categories, just for fun, if we've got one, what would be the opposite of that? Just for torture? Because Jordan Sweet's still a good price.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are not happy with that. Yeah.
Just if you're a Jordan Sweet owner in AFL Fantasy, that sums up your season.
Nightmare.
That's all you need to do when retrospectively, we get to February of 2025 and people are like, how'd you go last year? You go, I own Jordan Sweet. Was he on field? Yep. Oh, you had that.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, MJ,
maybe that's our code word.
On a serious note, the funny thing with Sweet is I can still see a world where he gets back into that side and scores really well, and it's going to be sickening for half the comp. Anyway, enough of Rucks.
Oh, don't you dare. We mentioned it a few minutes ago. We do need to wrap up the podcast in a moment, but Clayton Oliver's a player we got to talk about, isn't it? I watched him at the Geelong match probably maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago now with Mini Monk. And we were both at the ground. I was like, oh, gee whiz, he looks back. His spread, his run and carry, his ability to get to multiple contests, his fitness was there. His contested work was there. Everything that we know and love about Oliver was on display. But really over the past couple of weeks, Jordox, he just doesn't quite get there for us. And so he's now priced at 744k, an average of 83. We know that's heavily impacted by the start of the year, but nothing over 90 in the last 3 and a break even of 105. Some coaches have no problem moving him off this week, and some other coaches are like, oh, but he's still such great value. Talk to the coach that's thinking of holding Clary. Can you talk them out of it? Because I understand they'd want to hold it, but as a coach that's sitting in the top couple of hundred, and someone that I think you're a Clary Oliver too, owner, I believe. Why and how should you be looking to move off Clayton this week from your perspective?
He's right at the top of my trade out list. I think you can make arguments either side of trading or holding. I guess the thing with Oliver is none of this is really got to be too surprising. And I say that as a guy who traded him in, thought I could cop his 80s and 90s for a month. He'll get going. The game will slow down. It'll suit him better. We'll start to see some real, Oliver type performances. But in retrospect, he didn't really have a preseason. And Melbourne as a side, I don't have the numbers, and obviously Gawn would be the exception. But that Melbourne midfield, no one's knocking the lights out in a scoring sense. Even a guy like Jack Viney, who is a draft guy, but last year was huge. This year, nothing. Petrarca's been pretty poor by his standards. I think they've got some younger guys going through there now. I mean, Sparrow's looked pretty good at times. So I don't know if it's not changing the guard. Clayton Oliver's too young to be part of a changing of a guard, but the lack of preseason and just the way Melbourne are playing and scoring this year, I don't think it's going to happen for him. And, you know, for me as an owner, I thought King's birthday, this is it, Clary. Show that you want to be a part of my side to the end. And he couldn't have been more terrible. I mean, one tackle, he barely touched the footy in that first quarter. I was looking at his score. He was on 3, and he just was on 3 for almost the whole quarter. I'm like tapping my phone. What are you doing, Clary? So
refresh.
Look, I think if you've got other things going on, and many will, because, you know, I reckon there's a lot of underperforming guys on the bye this week. I wouldn't say he's your top priority trade out. If you had to hold him, he has North after the bye. Sure. Who knows? He could turn it around. Maybe the bye will be good for him to freshen up and, you know, tactically, where's he running? Where's he going on the ground? What's not working for him? Because at the end of the day, MJ, he's one of the best midfielders we've seen in the last, you know, 7-8 years. A guy who, from the very beginning, was destined to be a star. And I think, if more than anything, he's a must start for 2025 because his price will be so good.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple of Ds. Like, if Track, who's gone in for surgery, we're not going to time soon, he's at a 90 average right now, let alone if he misses for the rest of the year and cops any kind a discount. That's 15 points below what he's previously done. I agree. Like, I'm happy to trade back into Oliver next week. If you're that bullish on Clary getting back to form, sideways him to a Tom Green this week. Your Connor Rosie in 2 weeks' time is going to be even cheaper than what Clary is. And yes, he's got a beautiful matchup against North Melbourne, but me, I'm like, man, you've got so many options available to you this week. And if you're desperately trying to find ways to get up to the top end, boys, play. If you want to hold him, I won't talk you out of it. Absolutely fine. But to me, he just feels like this ticket that you're like, man, he's not shown anything bar a week that he can be back to his 110 self. And even if you want to wait another week or two after the bye and be like, I'll wait and see. No, you're paying $800,000 for Clayton Oliver. What a disaster. So to me, I'm pretty happy to encourage coaches off him if they want to be aggressive and make some moves. Hey, Jordox, mate, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Before you do wrap,
been a hot minute since we've done it. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Just in the theme and, you know, the feel of fun and unique, I've just got a guy I want you to have a look at. Everyone can just keep an eye on. Just with Petraka's awful injury, Oliver's terrible form, I was thinking over the week, you know, yesterday, who's going to be the guy that could possibly pop in there? And it was a guy who had a big uptick in CBAs. Cozzy Pickett scored a 95 on the weekend. He is a forward priced at $590K. If his CBAs stay up, keep an eye on him for the run home as well.
After the bye.
Of course. Don't get him this week.
I thought you were heading somewhere and I didn't know. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad shout from you. I don't mind that. Hey, Jordox, mate. A pleasure having you back on the podcast, mate. If you want to catch up with him, he's still very much so a part of the coaches panel, and you'll see him right throughout this season, as well as post and pre-season V5, but spending a lot of time teaming up with Bales, Guesty, and the gang over at the AFL Fantasy Fanatics. So we appreciate you making some time away from your side hustle podcast to come back to your main first love, which I appreciate.
Anytime, MJ, and you know I mean that. Good to see you, mate.
Oh, you too. Oh, by the way, we didn't do a mention of the podcast AFL Fantasy Content Creators Cup last week, and I had several people rip into me and say, did you not do it, MJ, because you lost? I did lose, but that wasn't the reason why I mentioned it. And I'm not bringing it up this week just because I won. I'm bringing it up because people wanted to know. My quick answer is, if you always want to know, listen to the Fanatics podcast, because they'll happily tell you. And Bales, who's sitting second, will every single freaking week, because he's absolutely firing, as is Mitch Casey from the Ball Boys. He's having a stellar season at the moment. But running the coaches panel members and how did they went? I jagged myself a win. Mini Monk did not. Rids, despite putting up a 28-4, still didn't get the win either. And Louis, unfortunately, didn't get there. But some panel boys are sitting in finals at the moment. But it's a tough league to crack at the moment. If you want to find out all the details about that or get that infinite pack that is exclusively available to you, the details for that are in the description of this podcast episode. Hey, thank you for watching. If you've been checking this out on YouTube, comment below and let me know what are the trades you're making this week. I'd love to see moves that you're making. We'll be sure to comment back. If you haven't subscribed to the channel there, make sure you do that. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever your audio podcasts are found, you can make sure you give a 5-star rating and a review. If you do that, little nice written review on Apple Podcasts, from now to the year, my promise to you is I'll read you out in one of our upcoming strategy roundtables. Whether it's a super coach or an AFL fantasy one, will depend on what you say in the comments. So if you want a bit of a shout out, that's your way to get it. And then, of course, our Patreons, they get a ton of content. Did you know we deliver 4 podcasts a week? And depending on the tier of Patreon support you get all 4 of them. So if you want that and a bunch of other reward details for that, like the Infinite Wealth Pack, like the details to follow Jordox and the rest of the team from the coaches panel, can be found in the description of this episode. Good luck as you head into round 14. 3 trades available to you this week. Use them, and we'll be back with you again talking all things AFL Fantasy.